Welcome to the third episode of the second season of Sip of Sunshine. I'm your host, Chrissa Wadlow, and this week I'm talking to Dr. Olivia Kessel. Olivia hosts her own podcast, the Send Parenting Podcast. But who is she? We get to know her in this episode, so I hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to the third episode of A Sip of Sunshine of the second season. I can't believe we're in our second season. I'm Chrissa, I'm the host and also the founder of Sunshine Support. And today I've got the amazing Dr. Olivia Kessel with me, who I'm incredibly excited to chat to. So you might have seen me pop up on Olivia's podcast, Send Parenting Podcast. I've been on there a few times, and so I thought, let's just return the favour. Let's get chatting. We've got lots to chat about. We've got so much in common, so many things that we want to talk about. So, welcome. How are you?
Well, thank you. And it does feel a bit odd to be on the other side of the fence. It's kind of like when you're a patient instead of a doctor,
Yeah.
but it's
I
but
love that.
it's lovely. It's exciting. I get to feel now what all my guests feel like, when they're asked the tough questions and they have to, open up. But I'm sure
Yeah.
you'll crack me like a nut, Chrissa. I'm sure you
Oh,
will.
I'm gentle anyway. You know me. So, of course, we hear from all these amazing people on your podcast, and it is, oh my goodness, a phenomenal podcast. I love listening to it. I listen to it in the car, I listen to it in the bath, wherever I get 5 minutes peace, I'll put it on and keep stopping and starting. But it's absolutely fascinating because you've had some fantastic people on there talking about all manner of stuff. But the person I want to know about is you. Introducing Dr. Olivia Kessel. Which is why we're here today. So tell us about yourself. Give us a bit of an intro.
Well, I think, one of the first things is everyone presumes that I'm American by my accent. And actually, I was born in South Africa. And then
Oh,
we moved to England because my mom was British. And then we moved to America, where I became a citizen after my parents got naturalized as citizens. But the accent stuck. It didn't serve me well in school, actually, to have a British accent. Um,
no, no.
no.
And I think the British accent's such a peculiar one as well, because there's so many of them. You go sort of 10 minutes up the road and you're in a completely different accent bracket, aren't you?
Well, it's funny because my mom never lost her British accent, and if you move, I think before 12, you do adopt the accent of the country that you're in. But for me, sometimes when I've been like really nervous, like when we were going into what would be secondary school here, and they had an interview, I apparently spoke with a British accent throughout the entire interview. And
Amazing.
Americans love a British accent, but my mom afterwards, she didn't say anything, luckily, during the interview because it would have thrown me. But she said, Olivia,
Yeah.
why were you speaking with a British accent? I said, I don't know. I don't know. I was doing that.
Do you ever go back into it now?
Sometimes my accent can get really strange because I did my medical degree in the Royal College of Surgeons in Dublin, Ireland, and then so I can sometimes when I start speaking to Irish people, I'll start to develop an Irish kind of accent as well. And then I went and did my residency in Johannesburg General Hospital, where it's a South African accent. So sometimes, depending on who I'm talking to, weird stuff can come out of my mouth, and I'm a very good mimic. So it's embarrassing, but sometimes I
Yeah.
unconsciously start mimicking people. And if I've had time in that country, the likelihood is higher.
I'd love to say that I can do the same, and I think I actually think in other people's accents. But if I was to try a different accent, oh, I would offend so many people. My husband always goes, "Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. You're going to get yourself cancelled. Like, please don't try and do another accent." I can just about. I don't even know what mine is because I'm from Wales, but I sort of came to Derbyshire when I was 15. So again, mine is sort of when I went back home recently. They said, "Oh, you're like a posh Welsh person." I was like, "Oh, I'll accept that because I'm not posh at all."
No, it is funny. And I mean, my mom used to, she had a very British accent, but when she would speak to people, and it's an unconscious thing, that's what's really embarrassing. We're not trying to mimic people. And she had a very close best friend it was from India. And when she would talk with her, my mother would start to speak like she was, and I'm like, Mommy, what are you doing? Like, that is not okay. But she didn't know she was doing it. So anyway, I digress. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I've got a feeling we're going to do it a lot. Oh. After South Africa. So you started your life in South Africa, and then where did life take you there? Obviously, you've dotted around in terms of your degrees and your qualifications and education, and then what happened next? How come you're in England now?
So I can't think of a short answer to that one. But basically, I would guess I'm kind of like a citizen of the world. I think I've had 4 passports at different times
Wow.
from different countries, and I love to travel and I love to go new places. So, I get itchy feet probably every 5 years or so. So when I finished my medical degree in the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, I got the Irish Medical Council to approve me doing my residency in South Africa. So that was
Wow.
during, I was very interested in infectious disease, and that was during the rollout of antiretrovirals there. So I started as a resident there. And it was, I mean, you don't really learn hands on in Irish or English medical schools. You do that later. Well,
Yeah.
I started in the trauma unit in Johannesburg General
Wow.
Hospital, which is like the public hospital. And I didn't even know how to draw blood. I mean, I had no idea. And their philosophy is you see one, you do one, you
Do it.
teach one. And I'm not kidding. Like, they showed me how to put in a chest drain into somebody. And they're like, all right, next one is yours. I'm like, oh, don't leave me alone. Don't leave me alone with this.
Oh my God, that's terrifying.
I made friends with Archie, who was the neurosurgeon, and he had a whole bunch of paraplegics and quadriplegics in his ward. And I'm like, if they need any bloods drawn, any blood gases, anything where they have no feeling and I can, practice on them,
Yes.
you know, uh, that would be great. So he would call me up and I'd run over there and practice. I had one patient actually say to me after a week, Doctor, you're getting better at drawing blood. I'm like,
Oh.
I am so sorry.
Well, the thing is, I suppose it is one of those things until you do it, you're not going to get any better, are you? You're not going to, you need to learn. But I suppose the failing, we always say you need to fail in order to learn. It's kind of a big deal if you're doing that stuff if you fail.
Yeah,
So,
no. You don't want to fail and you don't want to hurt someone, do no harm is like part of
no.
your mantra. But it was a baptism by fire. And I mean, I would easily work 36-hour days, maybe have 12 hours off, then another 36-hour day. So it was brutal. It was a brutal experience. And what was also frustrating during that time period was kind of the prejudice that you would have seen in England and in San Francisco about HIV was still rife and
Mm.
rampant in Africa at that time. So you had the health minister, Shabalala Missimang, saying, you can't, don't take antiretrovirals, eat beetroot, eat garlic, Western man is trying to poison you. And
Wow.
Mandela was still alive then. And I remember, like, I couldn't sign a death certificate that someone had died of HIV. I was not allowed to. The body would be
Whoa.
kept in the morgue because you weren't allowed to. You'd have to say pneumonia. And Mandela came on the radio. His son, I think, died. He was 54 or 56 of HIV, of complications from it. And he said, "My son didn't die from pneumonia. He died from HIV. And it's time we address this." But at the same time, the kind of medications that were available were toxic. So they were not the drugs
Mm.
we were taking in England and America. They were the the first line drugs, so D14 and AZT. So people were getting horrible side effects. So lipodystrophy, so you'd lose the fat in your skin. So people could look at you and be like, aha, I know you have HIV because you're on medication
Oh.
that's doing this. And then they get peripheral neuropathy. So bad that they couldn't walk because they couldn't feel their feet. So
No.
that all bled into kind of the stigma, the
Yeah.
prejudice, and also the hesitancy for people to go on to antiretrovirals. So that
Mm.
kind of inspired me. I also married a disastrous man who ended up to be a complete and utter lunatic. He was, oh, I have no words. Anyway, so I left with a bag and my life and
Oh,
fled back
wow.
to California and my parents who lived there. And um, I was lucky to get away, and my parents were very kind to take me back in again. And they lived near to Gilead Sciences, which is one of the foremost pharmaceutical companies in providing antiretroviral drugs. So I decided I wanted to work there because I wanted to get access in Africa to first world drugs. So with the tenacity and hyper focus that can only be from someone who is neurodiverse,
Here
while
it
living
comes.
while living at my parents' house, I asked, my mom was on LinkedIn. She put out messages, send it out. I went and did informational interviews. I met the guy in the division. He actually turned out to be South African that I wanted to work in. I mean, I went and played golf with him. I cleaned the shit out of his boats, like the septic tank. I mean, I did everything possible. And 6 months, I still hadn't gotten, like I had some people there telling me, oh, we'd never hire a doctor. You don't know anything about being in pharmaceuticals. And my mom finally was like, Olivia, you might need to, spread the net. I was teaching
Yeah.
water aerobics as a career at that point at the local
Wow.
gym. And anyway, long story short, lucky for me, one of the women in the department that I wanted to work, the access program, got pregnant. And so he needed someone to fill in for her. And that's how I got my foot in the door there. And
Wow.
I then got 5 years working with that company to help to provide access in developing world. So I had like 130 countries. I got to travel all around the world, from Ukraine to Africa to China to Haiti to Dominican Republic. It was a amazing experience, and teach people
Amazing.
about antiretroviral drugs, ministries of health, and to get access in country. And it was just a phenomenal experience. My mom, sadly, during that period of time, ended up getting two types of cancer,
Wow.
and ended up, and I, you look back on life and I say, you know what? If I'd married a really nice guy in South Africa, I would never have come back. And I'm so lucky that I didn't.
Yeah.
And instead, I got to come back and I got to spend those years with my mom. And she died young at 62, but I got to
Oh,
be there with her
yeah.
through that. And that was, she was my best friend, my soulmate, my person. So that was a gift from
Yeah.
the universe. And when she passed away, which was a surprise, actually, it was actually quite a horrifying story, because she was going in for a heart operation after having colon cancer and breast cancer, and then she had heart issues. And my dad called me up and he said, "Look, we're in the emergency room near our house, and they want to call her dead. They want to call it." And I was driving up from San Francisco. I said, "Don't, just tell them to keep trying." And I pulled into the emergency room. And because I've worked at Joburg Gen and because I've resuscitated so many people, I took over and I resuscitated her and I got her back. Um,
Wow.
but her blood pressure, it had been so long that although we got her onto life support, she had permanent base brain damage.
Oh,
So we
wow.
a week later had to take her off the life support system because she wouldn't have ever recovered. So that was a life kind of changing moment as well, because she left us each, because she had life insurance. So we each got a sum of money. And I stood there thinking, well, what do I want to do now with this? Where do I go? And again, being probably neurodiverse, I decided, well, I'm 38. I talked to my mom about the fact that, I didn't know if I was going to meet the right man in my life, but I knew that I really wanted to have a child. So, and you got to think, this is about 14, 15 years ago. People weren't doing this, but I did have
Mm.
friends in the gay community who were using IVF, using donors and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, if they can do it, why can't I? And now
Yeah.
I've got some money in my pocket. So I decided to go and use a sperm donor and do IVF, and I got pregnant with Alexandra.
Wow.
And then I decided, well, I didn't want to keep working at Gilead. It was quite a hectic lifestyle and job, and they weren't focused on the patient and how we keep them adhering to medication. So I wanted to do something in Africa. And I figured, as a single parent, in Africa, you get a lot more support. You can have a nanny, you can have people, around you. So 8 months pregnant, I decided to move to Swaziland with my daughter and
Wow.
start a not-for-profit to help people with HIV adhere to their medication using simple mobile phone technology. So off I went.
Wow. And a lot of the themes that you're talking about here is like this absolute core value that you have quite clearly for justice and equity and things being available for everyone. And I think, I mean, it obviously shines through in the work that you do now, but this is not a new thing for you. And like you said about the neurodivergence, because you are diagnosed with neurodivergence.
Well, I'm diagnosed as dyslexia. I
Yeah.
would suspect through my journey with my daughter that I might have ADHD as well, but I don't have anyone to collaborate my childhood years. So they can't
Yeah.
properly diagnose me because my father wasn't really involved in our childhood. I mean, I moved 7 schools in 7 years. I can see a lot of it, but I can't be diagnosed. So I can't call myself ADHD, but I'm dyslexic. And yeah.
And again, it's an awful lot of, when we come together as a community, the neurodivergent community, and you'll know this from, the people the people you've interviewed, there is this core theme of that doesn't sit right with me. Why is this happening? How is this allowed to happen? I need to make a change. And it's like an itch, isn't it? That you need to scratch. So, what is school avoidance? Now, a lot of people call this school refusal, and it's really important that we reframe how we look at this because actually, our children aren't refusing to attend school, they're actually unable to attend school. Now, if a child was.
It's a powerful letter with a peppy sound that pops up in some of our favourite words. As we continue our reading adventure, we'll discover how the letter P helps us describe all sorts of things. Get ready for a perfect and playful journey.
To get excellent outcomes for their young people with special educational needs and disabilities. And what this means is that I get to see lots of different graduated response.
Meet our neighbours in space, the planets of the solar system. We live on Earth, but we're part of a much bigger family. There are 8 planets that all orbit or travel around the sun. Let's start with the closest.
How to teach our children and young people the skills they need to regulate their own behaviour, but in a way that really meets them where they are, rather than encouraging them to mask their behaviour so that the adults around them find them easier to manage. We hope you find this course super interesting and that you get lots out of it. So without further ado, let's go on to the first module.
The next stages. So I'm really keen to hear about then the next stage. So you're 8 months pregnant, you're on an aeroplane. What happens next for you and for your daughter?
So we moved to Swaziland, and which is a lot of people won't even know where it is. It's between Mozambique and South Africa. It's a tiny country with like 1 million people. It has a king who's polygamous and has many wives. And you might wonder, why did I choose that country? Well, I knew some people there. That was the first thing. And second of all, they only had one mobile phone provider, which I thought would be a benefit for my business because I was starting a not-for-profit that would help patients. So basically, they'd use a mobile phone. They'd say, yes, I've taken my HIV medication, and the technology would calculate it, and then they get a top-up credit on their phone. And I mean phones that don't even have Wi-Fi this would work on. And my technical advisor was actually an Ethiopian living in Swaziland. So I thought, great place to test this idea out. What I didn't know is that the king has absolutely no viewpoint on corporate responsibility or the fact that his country has one of the highest HIV rates. And to go and ask him to give me a discount on these SMS messages, you have to crawl on your hands and knees up to him. I'm not joking either.
God. Oh God.
And it was a really interesting country because I had to get my gardener to negotiate for me, but it started to work. And then I obviously had my daughter. I had a great nanny, and life was progressing. And then unfortunately, at 9 weeks of age, she got really, really sick. And she got a rash all over her body. Her temperature had spiked for a couple of days, but she just had her immunization, so that's what I thought it was.
Yeah.
But when the rash came, then I, started to freak out. Was this meningitis? Went to the pediatrician, because even when you're a doctor, you doubt yourself and you're like, ah.
Yeah,
So,
I
and
can
she just
imagine.
said, get in the car. And my dad had actually come out because, as I said, my mom passed away and he was kind of at a loose end. So he joined me in Swaziland. And so he drove and off we went to Johannesburg to get her seen. And as we were halfway there, I got sick as well. And it turned out we both had the Coxsackie virus, which is hand, foot, and mouth. Um,
Oh.
and because she was so little, it spread to her brain. and cause meningoencephalitis, but they'd never seen someone as old as I was with it as well. So I had given her no immunity, and I have to say, they did everything they could. They got immunoglobulins. They put a drip in her, and it was really touch and go as to whether or not she was going to survive. Actually, there was a day or two, and I said to my dad, I'm like, I don't know if I can survive this. If I lose her, I don't know. My brother said to me, "Oh, wouldn't that suck, Olivia, to lose your mom and your daughter in a year?" I'm
Oh
like,
God.
"Yeah, that would suck,
Mm.
Anthony. That would really
Yeah,
suck."
beyond that, yeah, absolutely.
So, but she was a fighter, and I mean, she was such a fighter, and we got through it. And I said, what can happen? And they said, well, because her brain swelled, but she had her fontanelles open, she could have potentially cerebral palsy, but she seemed to be doing okay. So I thought we had escaped that episode without any, long-term negative effects. But as she developed, she wasn't crawling, she wasn't able to pick herself up, she wasn't using her left arm at all. And I started, I noticed at 9 months that, like, when I would rub the back of her feet, she had this positive reflex, which is a sign of an upper motor neuron kind of thing. And that's when you really
Okay.
hate that you're a doctor, because you're like, oh my God, I can see this, and I don't want to see this. So then we had brain scans, and it came to light that, she had suffered brain damage from the meningoencephalitis, and they diagnosed her with the left hemiplegia. And I mean, my life fell apart. I have to be,
Yeah.
completely honest. It's a before and after moment. You look at your child, and the neurologist said to me, Olivia, I can't tell you if she'll walk. I can't tell you any of this stuff. She's like, and looking at the MRI myself, it was like kind of like Swiss cheese. She's like, we don't know when they myelinate. We can't even read this properly, but this is
Yeah.
what we're saying. And, I just said to her, well, I said, I believe, like, if you throw enough shit in the wall, some of it's going to stick. So I'm like, I'm going to do everything and anything in my power with my daughter to, I did nutrition. I did I flew people in from Cape Town to do brain gym with her. I got healers.
Wow.
I did neurophysiotherapy in Joburg in like 2-week increments, and then came back to Swaziland. I threw everything at it, and
Absolutely.
she did really well. She uses her left arm, but that period of time, you sit there going, am I going to have a really severely disabled child?
Yeah.
Or am I, all these thoughts going, is everyone going to look at her? Is it, all these, motherhood just took a veer off to a really dark, dark, dark place. And then you've got to pick yourself up,
Yeah.
and just get on with it. And, and also just realizing, what, no matter what, she's still that child that you're absolutely in love with. And she didn't change, just this diagnosis has changed. And, I was incredibly lucky. You wouldn't know she has cerebral palsy by looking at her at all. You wouldn't know. She has slight, we've met all of those challenges, and we have, gone beyond them. And it was, a humbling moment, I think, as a parent, but also a gift, because I had no expectations anymore.
Rethinking breakfast. Like, I've noticed as well, because I watch your Instagram reels because I love them, and there was one particular one that sticks in my mind where you were cooking breakfast,
Yeah.
and you were talking about the need for protein, and I thought to myself, that makes complete sense. So I went away and started doing my own bits of research, and I'm like, yes. And what I found really frustrating, because my kids now, I've started to say to them, look, we will be more cognitively able to function, our focus will be better, our body will be able to repair better if we make sure that we're having our protein, and we lead with protein, we don't lead with sugar, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's really making an impact. And my kids love talking about it. But what I found quite frustrating was we had to go to an appointment, a health appointment, where one of my children said, yeah, in the morning I have full fat Greek yogurt, and we have this fantastically clean protein powder by a brand called Will Powders. Not that I'm not on commission or anything, I just love it. And my daughter was saying that she scoops this in and then she puts some fruit with it. And the doctor was like, no, you you shouldn't be adding protein powder because children have all they need. They don't need any more. And I was thinking, I'm not going to have this conversation because I'm not a medical person.
Well,
But
Chrissa, we're not taught nutrition in medical school. Okay, we're not taught it. So he's not. You know what I mean? He or she.
yeah.
I don't know who it was, but do you know what I mean? They don't know what they're talking about either because they haven't really been trained, which is very
So it's
sad.
frustrating, isn't it? When you think you're moving forward. Talk to us about that anyway, because I've
Yeah, I
just
mean,
covered
and
it like saying talking
it's
about your reel,
no,
but
no, but it's so amazing because like, okay, we went, I now have totally rethought breakfast, right? My daughter doesn't like eggs. It just is the way it is. And that's a great source of protein, right? But she doesn't like it. I can hide it in oatmeal, which is what that reel was about. But I
yeah,
just decided, why do we have to eat a normal breakfast? So, in Thailand, they eat prawns for breakfast and pork with
yeah,
rice, with a nice chicken broth. She loves that. So sometimes she has prawns with
yeah,
broth for breakfast. We do
love it.
chicken, we do salmon. I mean, I do protein and it's stuff she likes,
Yeah,
it's rethinking how we do breakfast, and other
yeah,
countries do breakfast really differently. Why can't we do breakfast really
yeah,
differently? And I say to her, I said, what do you, I say, and now she's learning to cook breakfast, so,
love
because
it.
we wake up really early in my house. I wake up to write my book at like 5, and she wakes up because she likes to have her downtime. She's like, she was eating a lot of junky food in the morning when she got up.
Yeah,
If there's anything junky, unless I put a lock and key under it, she will find it. She's very good at that. So I'm like,
yeah,
she's like, well, I said, what about if we have breakfast first thing in the morning? She's like, great. And then I was like, oh, I'm making breakfast for her. I'm not doing my writing. And she's like, I'm like, what about if I
yeah,
teach you how to make breakfast? And so I'm like, okay, we
love
have
that.
to think of a protein. What kind of proteins are there? Okay, we've got chicken in the fridge. We've got salmon in the fridge. You could cook some bacon. We could do peanut butter. She likes to make peanut butter sandwiches with jam and then shredded cheese on top. So, she's now starting to, and some mornings she's going to be like, Mommy, I'm too tired. You do it for me. And I'll do it. But, we're starting to, and her thinking, okay, this is what's going to fuel my brain for the day because my body's low in dopamine. And it needs the precursor. She's on ADHD medication, which is going to make more dopamine. Well, it needs that protein to build that up. So it's part of, and her understanding that. She's also like your daughter. She's 13, going on 14 this summer. It's teaching them because eventually, she's hopefully going to get to a point where she's making the right decisions for herself. We're not
And
we're not
that's all
there
we
yet.
can do. Yeah, but that's all we can do is just keep giving them the tools so they can make these decisions when the time comes. It's all we can do, isn't it? And every child is so different. I
And
know
not
that with,
forcing them, and not forcing like, okay,
yeah,
you eat your eggs, you've got to eat your eggs. No, figure out what they like that is healthy that they can then eat and I make
absolutely
flapjacks with like so many different things in them, pumpkin
amazing.
seeds, chia seeds, walnuts, all, and she likes the way they taste. So it's finding what your child likes and then also
Yeah,
helping them on that journey to understand it. And it does
absolutely.
make
And
a
it's,
difference. I mean, it really does during the
yeah,
day. I don't know about you. I feel so different than what
yeah.
we were eating, cereals or, you know
Oh God. And we're fed this stuff. Not that I want to make this some sort of like medical political podcast, but I'm happy to happy to talk about how unethical it is that the marketing, we're absolutely lambasted wherever we go with marketing of processed food. And it's really hard for us as parents when we know better and we're thinking, no, I don't want my kids to be eating Cocoa Pops in the morning. I want them to be eating a clean breakfast to give them a good start in the day. It's not just about their brains, and being able to function, but being able to make those good choices. And I know I've got with, ADHD in particular, huge impulse control difficulties,
Yeah.
particularly when it comes from food, because my dopamine comes from that sugar. And I don't want to feed that to them. I think as a child of the 80s, it was all about the snap, crackle, and pop effect. It was everything in your face and wow, this looks incredible, and feel that hit as it rushes through your system. It's a drug. And so being able to give this education to our children is so important, but it is hard because you're fighting the system every step of the way, aren't you?
And honestly, like I've had to remove it from the house because
Mhm.
there is, and not like always, I have some and I've got to keep hiding where I put them, but she can have some stuff, but it's limited. But if I leave it out in the cupboard, I can't blame her. She doesn't have the impulse control, and it's
Exactly.
giving her the hit. So it's I'm the same way. If I have milk chocolate in the house, even one of those huge Cadbury ones that are somehow
gone.
always cheaper than the small ones. I will eat that whole thing till I'm so sick. I have to take an acid pill to go to sleep, you know?
Sounds
And not
familiar.
once, multiple times. So I can't have that chocolate in the house. I have no
No,
self-control. It has to stay in the supermarket.
no, I
And if I
completely
buy
agree.
chocolate, it has to be a small one, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not one of these people, when they can break a bit off. And what is that about? It's going. It's going. If it's in my cupboard, it's gone, actually.
Sometimes even in the car on the way back from the supermarket.
Sneaking it so nobody sees. Who am I hiding from? I'm on my own. I love that. The Send Parenting Podcast. So, I mean, we share so much. We've got so much in common. We've got, whilst our journeys have been completely different, and I always talk about we're in the same storm, we're in different boats, but we recognize one another's boat, and we're like, yes, I've got a lot in common with you. And I think one of the things that I hope has come through in this podcast today is the power of connection when you get to meet someone who's on your wavelength, who gets the struggle, they understand it, and they're just interested in one another. And I think one of the things that comes through heavily in your podcast is that absolute information sharing, but also the need for connection. It's a lonely road, and I feel like your podcast gives that companionship, a lot of validation and companionship, as well as being informative. So, do you want to briefly talk us through the overview of the Send Parenting Podcast? And we'll put a link to it as well in the show notes.
Yeah, no, that's it. It's, it was started as an inspiration for my daughter and how alone I felt and how really pissed off, actually, if that is the correct word, with the local authority. I was so angry with them. I was so angry, as I know many parents are. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to take them on. They've done a lot of illegal stuff, and I could have fought them, but I didn't have that strength, nor did I have the money. But I thought, you know what, how I can really, put one up on them is to empower other parents to have the knowledge so that
Yes.
they can screw the local authority over and get their children what they deserve in education. And that's the best revenge is living well. And as I said, like,
Yes.
the podcast has also super helped me. It's introduced me to so many people, and it helps me every day. And I hear from my listeners that it helps them as well. So it's just been an amazing, amazing thing. And then I've also started a WhatsApp community with moms, mainly moms from the podcast. I think we have about 160 now, and they
Amazing.
are the most supportive women. You know what I mean? Moms come on and they say, like, this is happening to me. And then another mom will chip in and say, oh, I had that exact same thing happen to me. And then they support each other. And, when people put stuff that shouldn't be in the community, they police it themselves as well. It is a safe place.
Love
And I
that.
just, no one has to be alone. And you just hear over and over, I felt so alone. Oh, I can't believe
Yes.
you're having this problem too. I felt, so ashamed. All these horrible feelings that we feel. I'm hoping that, you, me, all the other moms out there, that's a beautiful thing. Everyone wants to give back, and everyone wants to really, wherever they are on their journey, they want to help
Yeah,
pull the moms up behind them and help
they
them,
do.
and they're just, it's just wonderful. It's a beautiful place, and it's lovely that we haven't become so hardened and embittered by our struggles that we've become nasty people.
Yeah.
It's had the absolute opposite effect. And I'm just, it's opened my life up, and it's let me see just that, there are wonderful, wonderful moms and some dads out there who are just, surviving and thriving.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But it is that power of connection, knowing that you're not on your own, because so many of us have gone through that where we thought we were, and knowing that there is a community, there is a tribe for you. And the WhatsApp group just sounds amazing, so incredibly validating, which is at the core really of that recovery. And I think that validation is what prevents us from being bitter, particularly in that community. You're going to think to yourself, I'm safe. I don't need to put my defense up. I don't need to go on the attack because I'm safe in
Yeah.
here, in this little bubble.
And these people get me. I don't, I think that your friends, before you maybe know that your child is neurodiverse, before you know anything, your friends don't get it. I mean, I had a
Mhm.
very close friend of mine say, oh, you're just trying to get an EHCP to get a free education. I was like, you don't get me. I would
Now,
pay you know, you don't get it. You know what I mean? And
No.
that's the opposite in people like meeting you through the podcast and through the
Yeah.
community is they get it. They get how hard it is. They get you. And
Yeah.
that is just worth its weight in gold, you know?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You just feel like you belong, which is
Yeah.
just wonderful. Well, thank you so much for today. It's been an absolute joy. Um, can you also remind everyone where they can find your podcast?
Yes, it's on all podcast platforms. So it's SEND parenting, which I say stands for Special Education Neurodiversity Podcasting. And you can find it anywhere. You can find it, I'll give you the link tree as well. And then you can also, we have a website, which is www.sendparenting.com. And I'll give the link also to the WhatsApp group that you can include in the show notes. And yeah, it's
Yes.
yeah.
Wonderful. I'm absolutely thrilled. I was so looking forward to this podcast, and it didn't disappoint because I think we covered about 4,500 topics, which is exactly what my aim was.
Well, Chrissa, you have been a great host, and it's been so much fun to be on the other side of the
Good,
microphone.
good. You need to book in some more now.
Thank you
you
for
so
having
much.
me.
Thank you. What a fantastic episode that was. I really enjoyed having a chat with Dr. Olivia Kessel. I hope you enjoyed it too. Stay tuned for more.